The lights were too bright on my skin, hot, almost punishing, casting my shadow across the makeshift stage in the dingy conference hall. I clutched my violin case, knuckles white. The audience, dozens of suited investors, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, studied me like I was something they'd found on the sole of their shoe. The words I'd rehearsed all week abandoned me. I started again, voice thin, echoing across the rows. "My name is Peter," I said. "I'm here to propose us to invite you to invest in." My tongue felt thick. It sounded ridiculous even to me. I watched a woman in the front row cover a yawn with her palm, her bangles clinking. A man whispered something to her. She suppressed a smirk. I tried not to flinch. "I want to create a classical music conservatory in Nairobi," I finished weakly, my script trembling in my fist. "To bring opportunities here for youth who never—" "Excuse me," a bespectacled man raised his hand, not really waiting for my invitation. "You want to teach Mozart here, in slums?" The laughter rippled outward. A young man near the back made a humming sound, imitating snoring. Another scanned his phone. "It's a business pitch," someone murmured, "not an audition." The moderator's lips framed a sorry smile. "Mr. Njoroge, if there are no questions." She gestured politely for me to leave. I walked off. Each step felt like wading through mud. I could hear someone on stage clearing their throat to introduce the next project, an app for Boda Boda logistics. Investors perked up. I kept walking, barely noticing the violin case cut into my hand as I gripped it too hard. I let the exit doors swallow me into the chilly corridor, breath heaving, grief scraping the inside of my chest raw. I caught my reflection, hollow-eyed, jaw clenched, under the greenish light. I remembered my mother's words the day I told her about my dream. "Music is for the idle, Peter. You're not a Mzungu." The neighbors had laughed for days, calling me Beethoven whenever I passed, as if my ambition was some tasteless joke. In the parking lot, I sat on a curb beside a trash bin overflowing with fever tree branches and soggy chapati wrappers. My phone buzzed, a message from my aunt. "I told your mom you tried. Come for supper, don't be late, Peter." I winced at the pity in every syllable. The walk home felt heavy. There was a dull, persistent ache inside me, not only of failure but of something starker. A kind of clarity had etched itself into my skull. It shouldn't matter what they thought. I knew the music I was capable of, even if nobody else did. But that night, lying awake in my cramped flat as rain hammered my roof and matatus growled on the avenue below, the old stories replayed. Of my father dismissing my early lessons, my sister whispering to her friends as I practiced scales in the dusk. The next morning I rose before dawn, fingers numb. I counted my savings again, barely enough for food, far less for grand schemes. The city was grey and unsympathetic at that hour. I tuned my violin with trembling hands and made my way to Uhuru Park, shivering in the mist. There, on a paint-flaked bench among lovers and street hawkers, I set out my open case and played. The Bach sonatas, the same ones my teacher, Mrs. Camo, had coaxed from my small hands as a boy in Langata. Passers-by slowed, some frowned, some laughed. A child watched, rapt from behind her mother's kanga. She grinned when I dipped into a quick, playful phrase. For a second, something loosened inside me. The clarity that had settled last night returned, not as bitterness but as a blade. If the doors in Nairobi wouldn't open for me, I would find a window somewhere else. Days blurred. I played for coins in parks and malls, at weddings and funerals. Sometimes 100 shillings in the case made me feel like a king. At night I sent videos to competition after competition. No response, I kept at it. When rejection letters came, I pasted them on my wall, proof I was doing something instead of nothing, proof that the world had heard my question even if it said no. My old friends peeled away. I stopped going to family dinners. The last time I did, my uncle handed me a flyer for an insurance sales job. "Not everyone is meant for big things, Peter," he said, voice kind. I flinched, barely ate, left before dessert. The next day my aunt texted, "We love you, just worried, come home when you're ready." I didn't cry often then, but sometimes late, the grief would cover me. When I played, though late at night, alone in my dim kitchen or in the final echo of the park's dusk, there was a certainty that no one could touch. The pitch-perfect hum of the G string, the trembling tension behind a phrase, the way air seemed to shimmer with possibility. Almost a year after the pitch, the break happened by accident. I was rehearsing in Westgate Mall's echoing atrium, the security guards eyeing me warily, when an older white woman approached. She wore thick glasses, a scarf patterned with tiny cellos. After my set, she pressed a card into my palm. "I'm with the Goethe-Institut," she said with a faint German accent. "I know a friend of a friend who needs a violinist." Would you be willing to audition? I gripped her card so tight the edges dug into my palm. Yes, I stammered. Yes, thank you. I spent half my rent on new strings and borrowed a tie from my cousin. On the appointed day my shoes shined, I arrived at a house off James Gicheru Road, a modern palace compared to the patchwork walls of my flat. Inside, 5 musicians waited, bows perched on the edge of their cases, eyes flicking over me. The conductor, a serious-eyed Nigerian named Tund, asked if I could sight-read a Bartok duet. My hands shook, but my touch stayed sure. I poured every bitter disappointment into that performance. Afterward, Tund nodded. You are not what I expected, Peter. Good. He looked at my battered violin and said, we tour in 3 months, get your papers ready. In the weeks that followed, I packed, sold my Beat headphones for bus fare, applied for a passport. My mother watched in stony silence. So you want to go to Europe and become what, a beggar? She asked, her eyes hard. This is not a career, this is a way to starve. Her words hung in the cramped room. My father cleared his throat, eyes on the TV. I left Nairobi with 1 suitcase and my violin. Sometimes, in airports, I'd trace the curve of the molded case with my thumb. Sometimes I thought of the jeering voices, my uncle's caution, the neighbors' laughter. Sometimes I felt only dread at the immensity ahead. We played halls in Berlin, Prague, Paris. I stayed in hostels and friends' sofas, always with my violin by my pillow and hope, tentative, lighting small flames inside. The concerts taught me hunger and humility. The music taught me discipline. One night in Prague, our soloist fell ill, and Tund picked me to cover the Mozart concerto in D I played, as if my life depended on it. Afterwards, applause thundered, and I cried behind the curtain for the first time in years. With some of my spare concert money, I sent home what I could. I kept every remittance slip. My family didn't reply to any emails except for the most perfunctory. Word trickled back, Peter is now chasing white women. He thinks he is something. I stopped reading WhatsApp. 2 years passed, auditions, competitions, a subscription series in Vienna, then Amsterdam, then Madrid, offers to teach, to record, to appear in chamber ensembles. I played with hunger and now purpose. I kept my head down, heart open. One morning a message landed in my inbox, a video of my father, frail, voice barely audible. He'd had a stroke. My mother's text followed, stern and direct. Come home if you are not too big for us. I returned to Nairobi with my violin 4 years after that disastrous investor pitch. The city seemed both familiar and alien, the green gleam after rain, the taste of dust, the matatu's dirge, the stray goats chewing grass in traffic meridians. My family waited outside the house. My mother's eyes were wary, but she hugged me. My father, silent, managed a half smile. Neighbors buzzed with gossip. Peter is back. Let's see what he brought from Europe. An orchestra in his bag, they laughed. My old classmates called. Some were now lawyers, accountants, mothers, fathers. Some professed respect. Others rolled their eyes behind their drinks. No one quite looked me in the eye. I offered to play a benefit concert for the local church, raising money to support music lessons for children. They laughed at first, but I insisted, printing flyers, going door to door with my cousin to hand them out. Only Peter would bring Beethoven things here, a neighbor joked. The night of the concert, I arrived early to the open-sided church tent, nervous as a boy. My mother came, lips set, carrying a flask of tea for the volunteers. My father sat quiet, a blanket around his knees. The pews filled, then the plastic chairs outside, then people standing in the aisles. My old violin teacher, Mrs. Camo, appeared in the front row, squeezed between her daughters. When I stepped up, the murmurs faded. A distant generator coughed. For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. What if they still didn't listen? I breathed in, drew the bow across the strings. The Brahms sonata unfurled, aching and sweet, a river of sound carrying the memory of that first humiliating pitch, every jeer, every sleepless night. The notes shimmered in the tent, brushed the faces of people who'd never heard these melodies. Children stopped fidgeting, eyes wide. My neighbor, the first to call my dream nonsense, sat with tears running down his cheeks. When the final note lingered, I opened my eyes. Silence, then a roar of applause, honest, raucous, unself-conscious. My mother, cheeks wet, nodded once. My father's hands fluttered together, a shaky attempt at clapping. Mrs. Camo hugged me fiercely afterward. You came home, she whispered. People pressed money into the donation box. Some shyly asked for selfies. Many just stood quietly, eyes shining, unsure of the right words. Later, outside, the neighbor who'd mocked me the loudest stopped me by the gate. Peter. Forgive us, I didn't believe, but you brought the world here, I smiled at him, exhausted, the air heavy with the scent of jacaranda blossoms. It was always here, I said. I just found a way to let you hear it. That night at home, sipping tea with my family crowded around a battered table, I laid an envelope with the benefit proceeds in my mother's hands. For the music, for the kids, I said. She held it, her fingers trembling. You did not become useless, she said softly. You became something we cannot name. Her words loosened something in me. The grief receded. What remained was a clarity sharper than anything I'd felt in Berlin or Vienna, one rooted in the red dust of Langata, in every jeer and every note I'd grown up playing. I stayed. Taught children who reminded me of myself, all sense and stubbornness. I founded the conservatory with the seed money I'd finally raised in Europe, in a converted schoolroom, peeling paint on the walls, windows open to the sounds of the city. Sometimes I played with my students under mango trees, the hum of traffic mixing with batch. Parents visited, arms folded, skeptical. Then, little by little, they heard what I did, the laughter in a quick scurry up the D string, the sigh in a descending scale. Pride joined skepticism in their eyes. I had found my way home, not triumphant but whole, carrying all my old wounds as proof. I had become finally visible, not as a joke, not as a warning, but as the answer to a question nobody had thought to ask. And sometimes, late at night, music curled through the dark rooms of my childhood home. My father dozed beside the radio. My mother listened from the kitchen. The city breathed around us, old fears spent, replaced by something warmer, something like grace.